Thank you for your help,
All right,
Jerry.
we gotta go, Jeff.
Okay. Well, welcome to all. This is a moving story that I want to tell that really struck me personally in a way that yeah, it probably wasn't meant to. It was a newspaper article. This is an unusual story. It's about somebody who was hiding from the Nazis. But the story that happened during World War II, and it just emerged. And how can that be? 80 years of silence. How's that possible? I stumbled across this by my ritual. My ritual is sitting down in the morning with coffee, and I've got my newspaper, and here, December December 20, 2023, was this article, oddly enough, in the art section, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. So it hit me so as being so important. Why is this not known? Uh, I saw it only in the New York Times. Later, I found a reference, a story that was mentioned in one issue of the Smithsonian Magazine. If it was on Facebook, would anybody notice? If it was on PBS, how large a following do they have? I mean, a lot of people don't watch, PBS. They watch Fox News. Um, so in seeing this, I thought, okay, it's my job. This is a job for Bagel you. So here we are. I want to also introduce now some very special guests who I didn't expect to have, and these are the people who are central to the story. One is the daughter of Curt Bloch, Simone. If you can wave your hand, well, and also Thilo von Dentschitz from all the way from Germany, uh, who really put this together and in the process of trying to tell the story so that the world would know. And part of my doing this is to my own little amplification right here from New Hope and Lambertville to accelerate the telling of the story because I think it's so important. And I invite our guests. I'm going to be giving a presentation, but anytime you wish to speak up, please just do. Now, we will have towards the end a discussion and question and answer session, and I have my own questions, but I think we'll probably all have questions about, this project and what it means and what might still yet happen. So unlike Anne Frank, Curt survived. Young Anne Frank's tragic drama sparked a worldwide interest in her hiding place, which has been visited by millions of people, including me, maybe like 25, 30 years ago. I went through that and I learned just a couple of weeks ago, also through a mention in the New York Times, that a replica of Anne Frank's hiding place is now being prepared for New York, exactly where, probably Times Square. I have trouble with that. What does this really mean? How do I understand this? Also, I read an announcement of a fictional children's story book about Anne Frank. How do I receive that? How do you feel about it? How about the facts? You know, Suddenly Anne Frank is a commodity, or maybe not so suddenly. So, what does this really mean? It's really a troubling question. So, here I am, a senior citizen. I'm 87, and I still remember Pearl Harbor. I was like four or between 4 and 5. And I had, during the 4 years of the war, started learning and hearing from my parents about the atrocities. And all this was while Kurt Bloch was still hiding from the Nazis. Today, I reflect on that imprisonment of his, and the still lingering anxieties that come, and now renewed anxieties that Jews face today. Lots going on as a result of what happened last Tuesday. And what does this mean? We had not only last Tuesday, we had Amsterdam. I read where in Amsterdam there was a WhatsApp that went out on about what was the word that was used? It was called Hunt Jews. Is this not Kristallnacht in a newer version? So am I being paranoid? Maybe. But I'm also realizing we need to be diligent. We need to understand what's going on. We need to be proactive. It's our job to, uh, to stay alert and to be knowledgeable. Now, what I'm going to do first is this presentation is really an overview. The actual material is so dense. You will find in the chat the link to the website, which is done in 3 languages. Thank you, Thilo. It is done in such a way where there are cross references. It is a wonderful website. And we'll also talk about the exhibit that took place at the Berlin Jewish Museum. So first, I want to run a little less than 3-minute video, which I just did with my iPhone, just panning through the covers of 96 booklets as a starting way to appreciate the amount of work. Jerry, if you would run that, please.
Can you see it?
Yeah, there's no sound, but you'll see it just, I'm just stroking my finger across. You could see this is the works of 1943, one every week. These are just the covers. There were like 492 poems, 1,700 pages. We're still in 1943. In 1944. So although it's 3 minutes, it's a long time to stare at the screen. So you can look at each one, blow it up, look inside, absorb the monumental quality of this. Obviously, if we looked through each one of them, you'd be here all day.
Abraham,
Yes,
the OWC stand for?
underwater cabaret, I think. I
Yes,
think, yes.
yes. Uh,
Thank you, Simone.
And there are also, I mean, just so that you know, these are all, this is the website, isn't, and you can look at all of this and open any of them anytime. That, I mean, just,
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to screen share something that came to light for me that I really didn't have time to put into this, and I will show you uh, this. Can you see this image?
Yes.
Okay. This is a book that was published by a Gerhard Grunenveld, and I believe it's in Dutch. Amazon has it. This is kind of a teaser to me because I can't read it. Yeah, I think something for the future, if somehow it could be worked out. How about a major American publisher translate it and publish it in all the bookstores in English? So it is, we can all have it and look at it leisurely. I mean, just a thought, but this was the book that was available right before the exhibit at the Berlin Jewish Museum. Okay, I will close the screen share now. Okay, so now I will go through a PowerPoint, and if you would be so kind. Okay, so I'm going to be making comments and then reading some of these slides. There are some, I think, 24 slides. Uh, like Hayas likes to say, we all come from immigrants. The United States, I'm first generation. My mother came from Russia. My father came from Palestine. This was the Golden Medina. This was the safe place, the safe harbor for Jews. But today, we're not so sure. And there's a lot of angst because, in Germany, there was a time of the rise of the fascists. And at first, it really wasn't believed this will blow over. Germany was a democracy. What happened? So in this presentation, I have a very personal response to this. I mean, there's the storytelling. I'm not just going to repeat what the exhibit does and what the books do, but also reflect on it. This is an amazing story. It's a miracle that it's here. Curt Bloch was a German Jew who was hidden from the Nazis in a tiny crawl space below the attic rafters in a modest Dutch home. He was sustained by both food and the materials he needed to make 96 single copy editions of a satirical, highly creative magazine series called The Underwater Cabaret, just now drawing attention. Slide 2, Jerry, please.
Yep.
So I held up this magazine. I was a child when this was happening. My reflections on December 7th, 1941. I remember that because my parents were clearly upset, and I remember them. We lived in a very poor household in Philadelphia, which that neighborhood is now transformed into big upscale, but it wasn't in those days. And they rushed out to a nearby store to get like the last radio because they knew that this war would be meaningful. They needed to have information. And during that time, Curt Bloch was evading, but not yet in hiding. He was evading the Nazis. And it's really a gripping story of potential death. And it surprises me that by circumstances it fell into the cracks and was unknown for all of these years. And how is it that something suddenly becomes aware? I found myself thinking about years ago, there's this discovery of this mummy in the Alps. Thanks to global warming, it was Uzi, who was found only because of global warming. His body was uncovered, and they realized this corpse was 3,000 years old, and it could have led to a whole discovery and new information. This is comparable. It's an uncovering, thanks to the Bloch family and to Thilo, that this is now coming to light. The mention in the article says a lone man taking on the Nazis. I'm also reflecting how it's in the art section. Maybe it should be history. Okay, so then I learned about the Berlin Museum and this upcoming exhibition, The Berlin of Adolf Hitler. I will mention that as a young person, just struggling to establish myself, I really didn't have any money. And I remember buying Volkswagens, and I was really criticized by people. How dare you buy anything German? I was looking for economy. You fill up the gas tank for $3. Doesn't happen today. But here is not only, and I marvel that there is a Jewish museum in Berlin, and I understand there are Jewish museums in other places. I believe there's a Munich Jewish museum, and I marvel at that. And not only that, it is designed by a famous artist who's the son of Holocaust survivor Liebskin. And look at this place. Look at this guy. Yet today, while Germany has really turned itself around and really become an ally, there are pockets that are threatening. There's a fascist element that's there and maybe growing. So who can predict the future? Who could have predicted last Tuesday? Next slide, please, Jerry. So, as I said, this whole event was really built on the work by the Bloch family and Thilo. I was surprised. Originally, this was supposed to be presented in April, and I had a medical emergency, and so we're doing it today, and it's even more meaningful today because it's after the election. We publicize our events by doing a promotional flyer. We put it into our newsletter. That's all we did. The newsletter, is in our website. The website is connected to the internet. And I was so amazed that I get an email from somebody in Germany. He said, I see what you're doing, and I'd like to know about it. And it was Thilo. And I was amazed and surprised and welcomed, but also found this, what's going on. I felt that, how does this happen? I mean, with AI and, what's private? I'm rejoicing, but also find this a little bit disturbing that we're so connected that I may not realize how far connected we are and how reachable we are to those who may want to do us harm. So here is one example. I don't know which edition it is, but I could find out. But Bloch magazine was satirical. Here he depicts British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, whose policy of appeasing Hitler drew criticism. Does Putin get appeased? Who knows what's going to happen? Each issue included original art, poetry, and songs that often took aim at the Nazis and their Dutch collaborator, Bloch, writing in both German and Dutch, mocked Nazi propaganda, responded to war news, and offered personal perspectives on wartime deprivations. This is history that's concurrent. It's amazing. Next slide, please. So I really forget exactly where I found this. I don't know whether it's part of the website or maybe I just stumbled across this. And here are something that really kind of struck me. Look at these sweet, innocent looking children with the yellow stars. And there are a couple of teachers in the center and in the middle and then to the left, and obviously some teachers. And I found myself examining those faces. And lo and behold, I saw myself. But I wasn't there. I was safe in Philadelphia, but I also at some point knew. So what happened? I remembered that I have hanging on my wall at my home a very old picture, which is the next slide, if you would show that, please. This was the hider on North 5th Street in Philadelphia. You could see the teachers who I loved. I'm sitting there. You can see my name with this pensive look. The kid above me has a wonderful smile. I wish I had that. But maybe he was shielded. Who knows? My brother is next to me. My two sisters are there. And there's a kind of match between the kids in the previous slide and me. And I'm aware of something that's going on. I have this history, and I draw that comparison. I can recall things. Now, my sister, who's near the top on the right, married a survivor who just died a couple of years ago. And I remember as a teenager when she got married that he had a tattoo, blue numbers on his forearm. That kind of shocked me. And I realized he was one of 4 survivors, but there were 13 children, and only 4 were left who managed to get to America. It's that close. And when I see his number or saw his number, and I wish I knew that number. I was never gutsy enough to ask, or write it down. That was his non-human identity. Next slide, please. So here's another identity. It's Curt Bloch's identity. Notice his name, his picture, but look at that big J. We don't have on our Social Security card or our driver's license or anything about our religion or our political party. But what about our Facebook or Google? I mean, certainly Facebook knows about my political inclination because that's what they feed me. Or at least I reject the other stuff. There's more going on, and paired with AI, am I getting paranoid again? No, I need to be vigilant. I need to understand the power of these things and how they can affect us so that we don't become, the frogs in the water, and the water's on the stove, and, we just don't notice the heat building. The next slide 8, please. Just wanted to see the garret, the place where Curt and apparently 3 or 4 others existed, where he survived for 2 years. Imagine that confinement. I would probably go stir crazy. I see a light there, but I don't know where that's coming from, whether there's a window. I mean, certainly you can't illuminate it at night. How does one exist? How does one use the bathroom? How do people come in and out? And, you know, that's an interesting story in itself and very meaningful. We'll get to understand the kind of support that he had and from the kind of people who did the protecting and the hiding. Do an example of his poetry. Please go to slide 9. And I like to think of poetry as being more expressive
Oh, that's excellent.
than any other form of writing. To me, poetry can be sharp and precise and can have teeth. So in one poem, he sardonically suggests how recent events reordered what it meant to be a beast in the animal kingdom, the poem. Hyenas and jackals look on with jealousy, for they now seem as choir boys compared to humanity. Boy, rest with that. Go on to the next slide. Before I read the next slide, I want to mention how in the interim time when we had Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, I love reading the poetry in the Mahzor, and I came across a phrase, and I just memorized it so I could write it down later and read here now. Quote, thoughts are human, but poetry belongs to God. And I'm adding, could it be that these 97 editions are elevated, honored to a level of a prayer and of possible holiness? 97 prayers, perhaps. I'll read this. In his poem, The Way of Truth, for example, he advised an imagined German reader how to approach Goebbels' falsehoods. Yeah, we've been filled with lots of falsehoods recently. If he writes straight, read it crooked. If he writes crooked, read it straight. Yes, just turn his writings around. In all his useful words, harm is found. Boy, sit with that. Next slide, please. So, who would dare, to risk all of life? Could it be that doing this defiance was more important than death? So this is a poem at the end of the war, and I included a photograph that I happened to take when visiting the Yiddish Book Center a number of years ago with Sharon. And I went there. It's a very worthwhile trip, and they have a fabulous exhibit. And on the lower level, they have more exhibits. Mostly, it's inventory that's being processed. And I found this sitting on a pile, this Yiddish forward. And those of you who could read it, it says Hitler Teut. And the reason I could read that is because when I was a child, we got the forward, which was only in Yiddish. I get it today, on the internet in English. There are some Yiddish, but mostly it's English. But those were the days when we got it every week, and my mother would read us stories by the light of the Shabbat candles. That's the power it has for me. So the poem. At Berlin with our Russian friends, the German nightingale, Herr Hitler, doesn't sing today. He's feeling, after some delay, a tie around his neck. Boy, isn't that gutsy? Next slide, please. So as I was saying, this is a risky enterprise, and here in apparently it must be. I'm not sure whether that's in this this cover or not. I just kind of pair things visually, but let me read this just to give you some sense. Each edition of Bloch's magazine consisted of just a single copy, but it may have been read by as many as 20 to 30 people, Groenville estimated. This is the writer whose book I showed you that is not written in English. Quote, there was a huge organization behind it, which included couriers who brought food, but who could also bring the magazines out to share with other people of the group who could be trusted. Any person could be a weak link and bring death to all. Put one in your pocket or hide it in a book. He got them all back. They must have returned them in some way. And what a miracle. Next slide, please. So as I said, we wouldn't have time. We'd be here all day if you saw it all. But I just wanted to show you, some more additions to that. I just scanned, picked up a few things just to go through them. Until Curt Bloch's liberation in 1945, he created 96 issues with a total of 490 poems and over 1,700 pages. Magazines were read by other people in hiding and their helpers. Thanks to the Bloch family and Thilo. Next, please. So, very dangerous circumstances, but I'll just read this to give a synopsis, a history. This was taken from some of the text I found about Curt Bloch's movements and life. Born in Dortmund, an industrial city in Western Germany, Bloch was 24 and working at his first job as a legal clerk when Hitler became Chancellor of Germany in 1933. Anti-Semitic violence in Bloch's hometown escalated even before official anti-Jewish measures were instituted. After a colleague threatened his life that same year, Bloch fled to Amsterdam, where he took a job with a Persian rug importer and dealer. He hoped to find refuge there before escaping further west, but his plans were dashed when the Germans invaded in 1940. The borders closed and the nightmare expanded to Jews there as well. Bloch's firm, obviously interested in rescuing him, transferred him to The Hague. But when non-Dutch Jews were forced out of the Western Jewish province by the occupier's decree, he was sent to work in a subsidiary in the Enschede. I'm not exactly sure where that is. I assume it's in the Netherlands. There he got a job with a local Jewish council, an organization installed by the German overseer to implement Nazi anti-Semitic edicts. Jews who worked for the council were assured that they were safe from deportation. They weren't safe from deportation. Technically, Bloch was an advisor for immigrant affairs, although no opportunities for immigration existed, only transport to a concentration camp. The Enschede Council understood the dangers and warned its members to go into hiding. It was aided by the influential Dutch Reformed Church pastor, Leendert Overdoorn, who secretly ran a resistance organization that helped some 1,000 Jews find places to hide, known as the Group Overdoorn. It consisted of about 50 people. Imagine, all of them risking their lives, including Overdoorn's two sisters. Overdone was arrested 3 times and was imprisoned for his work. He has been recognized as righteous among the nations by Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Remembrance Center in Jerusalem. Group Overdone found Bloch a hiding place in the home of Bertus Mennekin, an undertaker, and his wife, Alida Mennekin, a housekeeper. Their 2-story brick house on Plattenstraat 15 was in a middle-class district of Eastern Enschede. So let's move on to the next slide. Again, just to show a few more pages and to really emphasize that Bloch was a writer, a poet, an artist, historian, and that this is still very, very important. Next slide, please. So I found this slide where the books were going through restorations, and I kind of assume that this was as maybe part of the restoration in preparation for it to be at the Berlin Jewish Museum. I don't know, but restoration is needed to rescue it from oblivion. And now they exist. And the whole process I've read about restoration of old documents, it's a very interesting technical, technology. Go to the next, please. And this is the formal appearance at the museum. And there's an example, of some of the cases and somebody holding a brochure. The public appearance. It was between February and I believe in June. But I have a strong feeling that more is needed. And the question is, how can this, where is this exhibit now? How can this exhibit be transferred or transformed to other places so that it can be expanded? And certainly the idea of publishing Grunwald's book in English. Next one, slide 18. And here's something about how it happened. And we are most blessed to have Simone and Thilo here. And I'll read this. Bloch's daughter, Simone Bloch, now 64, remembers seeing the magazine in her family home growing up. She didn't fully grasp their significance or particularly care, a rebellious teenager by her own account. Simone said she never connected particularly well with her father, who died suddenly of a liver ailment when she was only 15. Really too young to really understand, and certainly teenage years are, filled with other things that it's hard to really process stuff. I'll read on. A couple of times he read from them at dinner parties, she said in an interview, but I didn't understand German then. Many years later, Simone's daughter, this is the granddaughter, Lucy, took an interest in the magazine, not just as family mementos, but as markers of history. She got a research grant to travel to Germany, where she was able to study more about her grandfather's history. Then Simone spent years researching for a way to expand the public awareness, obviously learning language and being a full participant. One of the previously undiscovered literary efforts that documents of the Holocaust of Europe. Now, this led to the book that I showed you earlier, The Underwater Cabaret, a satirical resistance of Curt Bloch by Gerard Grunenveld, which was published in the Netherlands early this year. I guess it's early last year, I guess, or this past year. Soon there will be a museum, which will really actually happen. My verses are like dynamite, Curt Bloch. Het Underwater Cabaret, which was already. So I'm reading about what's already happened. Let's go to the next slide, which is really shows the an opening page of the website that you'd be familiar with it. And as I said, it's trilingual. It's very finely organized too, with cross references. But this is really in preparation for another event, and we'll go to the next slide because I'm going to show you, um, how Curt and Simone found each other. There's apparently a private Facebook group of German-speaking Jews, and is the J pronounced like a Y, like Yekis? I don't know, but I know that we have some in our, in our presence here now, members of our synagogue that come from Jewish background. Have you heard this term Yekis? German-speaking Jews who formed their own community. German Jews had their own special they had earlier a great deal of freedoms, intellectual capability, and they really, were much different than Slavic Jews and Jews who were really, uh, culturally disadvantaged. But that's how they met. We'll go to the next slide. And here is one of the things that apparently Simone did in getting this published. It's in German, I believe, and maybe Simone can correct that, but it's a screenshot of notification and publication of the story, promoting the story of her father. And I don't see a date on that, but it may have been, last year. But without these efforts, we wouldn't have this today. Now, I discovered another thing. We'll go to the next slide. And that's this slide shows something. I get so many interesting websites, offer all the time. Uh, I pay attention to what's being done at YIVO. YIVO is the organization in New York that is for scholarship and teaching about the history and culture of Eastern Jews. And it is a wonderful organization. I've taken some of their classes, and I encourage you people to connect with what they do. But this was a particular class last March on little magazines in the Weimar Republic. I had never heard of this. Now, I do know that people publish privately, let's say poets who publish small editions of chapbooks, which they can hand out or distribute in very limited kinds of ways. But this was a surprise to me. There's kind of an intellectual powerhouse for individuals to put together their own little literary product. So was what Curt doing an example of this? That's the question we could ask our guest, but I was really kind of amazed to find that. All right, so we can go to the next slide. We did not just a few months ago, it was our member who did a book talk, and it's a striking name. People love dead Jews. And we had a very lively discussion about that. And in a way, the kind of Anne Frank story sort of suggests that. I'm reminded of how what's going on now and all of the negative publication with all due respect to people who really want to see peace, that the missiles are still flying. And yet what we really read are the killer Jews of babies, and not about how Hamas, Palestinian Hamas, are using women and babies to protect themselves as human shields to gain publicity. That's the other side that's not being discussed. That's part of the story. It's a very disturbing kind of story. So now this is the last slide, but I'm going to pause before we do that because I want to enter a few more things. We'll leave this on. There's another item that I came across that's timely, again, from my ritual of reading the New York Times. There's a movie coming out in the next week or two. You'll probably see it at the county. And it's done by the actor Jesse Eisenberg. And its name is A Real Pain. And the article in the Times talked about it in a kind of generational issue. And what he said was, certainly we know that immediately following the war, there was a great deal of silence and reticence. And then the tsunami of books happened. Think of Elie Wiesel and Primo Levi, who wanted to tell their story all of a sudden, and they were interested in accuracy and giving facts and giving the grim truth, which they did. And there was a ton of it. And there was the next generation, the children, who I understand very clearly, and because I've seen it with people that I know, survivors, that their children are really affected by that. And there were, artists like Art Spiegelman who did the series of like these graphic novels, Mouse, and other things that reflected and told stories that were representational fictions, that it was no longer personal because they weren't there, but they wanted to continue the story, but in a kind of literary way. We had a whole generation of that. And then, according to this reviewer, here comes the third generation, the grandchildren. And Eisenberg is an example of that. He's the grandchild of Holocaust survivor, and he and another person traveled to Poland to go see. But they really had a distance from that. It's not their lives. They live in safe America. They look at it from a whole different kind of distance. And that's very different. So recently with the election, I read a comment by a political commentator saying that people's interest fade when facts are presented, but their interest is maintained when drama is included. This is certainly true when you're doing showbiz. You keep the drama alive. So to me, what Curt was doing was a combination. He had the personal testimony, the real life while it was happening, plus the art, plus the history. It's kind of wrapping up three generations in one, and it truly makes it unique. Now, we're going to be entering a question and answer section, but I want us to look again, Jerry, if you will, forgive me, but I want us to run through the 3-minute video again, just to look at it. And it's kind of a quiet time before we start our discussions. this is like a meditation. So uh, I'm going to ask the first question, and then anybody's interested, please raise your hand or let us let us know that you have a question. But I'll start it off. And my question is, I'm asking our guests, what is the ultimate home of this historic artistic project?
The magazines themselves are
Yes.
now the property of the Jewish Museum Berlin, and they're going to be exhibited in 2026 in Amsterdam at the new Holocaust Museum there. And I'm trying to figure out how to get an exhibit in the United States, working on that with the Jewish Museum, but they are no longer in my family. They're preserved by the Jewish Museum Berlin. So that's the home of the physical objects, but every single one of them has been scanned completely and is available on the website. So you can see, and Thilo, I think, will show you, kind of what they look like, not just the covers, but the pages themselves, so that you get a better sense of, it's hard to find, it still is hard to find an American institution that will do this on loan, because the politics of museums, I think, are that they like to show the stuff that belongs to them, and this now belongs to the museum, the Jewish Museum.
Simone, maybe we can talk afterwards. We have in our membership a person who's on the board in Philadelphia at the Jewish Museum of American Jewish History. So if that's a possibility, that would be great if we could bring it to Philadelphia.
Yeah, I mean, what I really wanted to be able to do was, and Thilo is showing you kind of all the different ways of looking at the stuff on the website as we're talking. I had hoped to be able to do it in New York because my mother, who is 99 years old,
Yeah.
I would like for her to be able to, actually experience it.
Yeah.
But that may not be possible. But I'm working on it. So that's
Yeah.
Good luck.
Abraham,
Thilo.
yes. Okay, am I on? Okay.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, I just wanted to show you the options to browse through this digital archive. First, thanks for having me. But these are the three options to go through this treasure of 1,700 pages. So under the chapter magazines, you find three options: overview, timeline, and covers. I'm now on the cover section, so this is just to marvel at the beautiful collage art Curt Bloch created. Then we have the timeline, which you have shown in your video. This is a horizontal bar, or if you browse it with your cell phone, it's of course vertical. To look not only at the covers, but here you also see like little dots on the timeline. And here it says October 5 of 1943, 4 individuals are executed in Germany for spreading a satirical poem about Adolf Hitler. Curt Bloch responds to this with his poem A Goal. So he reflects on certain incidences. And so this is, and I think it was important for us to show you, this is an original page from these magazines. This is Curt Bloch's original handwriting. And he pastes a newspaper article on this page, and then he writes a poem on that. This poem is in German. So this was the timeline approach, and in addition, there is an overview So the overview shows all covers and all the poems by name. But of course, this is all translated into English. So if I push this button here, show original language, it will change and will show the original Dutch and German titles of the poems.
Thela, would you, I failed to mention this, forgive me, but your website and you and Simone won an award, an exceptional award for this. Tell us about it.
Yeah, actually, we have won 3 design awards, but the most spectacular award was given to us 2 weeks ago. It is the Grimme Online Award, the most prestigious award for digital content in Germany. So it's not only an award for the design, but also for the content. And I just wanted to mention that you have several options here. You can look, browse by original language. You can say, please show me only the German poems. So I hit German now, and you see these are the German poems he has written. And if I hit Dutch, you see only the Dutch poems he has written. And I think it is important for you, because you read translation lines from his poems, maybe to listen to some lines of his original poems. Let me just take one, which is called Wann, which is German. It means when. So I just take what is it? So I give you the English translation right next to it. And let me just read the German lines so that you have an idea how the rhyme and the rhythm fits in German. So it's called Wann. Wann endlich fallen unsere Ketten? Wann steigen wir empor zum Licht? Gar oft versprach man uns zu retten und immer noch geschah es nicht. Noch immer leben wir verborgen und sind dem Tageslicht entrückt. Man sitzt voll Angst und sitzt voll Sorgen, dass irgendjemand uns erblickt. Wir leben abseits und im Schatten. Wir leben abseits von der Welt. Wann endlich wird man uns gestatten, zu atmen unterm Himmelszelt? Wann können furchtlos wir und offen von aller Welt uns lassen sehen? Wir harren ständig und wir hoffen, dass es sehr bald doch möcht geschehen. Wir sind der ewigen Fessel müde. Wann endlich wird man uns befreien? Wann fällt die Knechtschaft? Wann ist's Friede? Wir wollen wieder Menschen sein. We want to be humans again, is the last line. So just to give you an idea about rhyme and rhythm of Curt Bloch's poems, written both in German and in English, in Dutch, and one poem was written in English to the Allied forces. So these are the 3 options to browse through these 1,700 pages, but there's also a history section telling about Curt Bloch's biography. So he was born in Dortmund, as you mentioned. This is his family. These are his parents, Paula and Siegfried Bloch. And here you see on the left side his sister Erna and his sister Leni and Max, who is the husband of Erna. All 3 were murdered by the Nazis. Oh. Erna was murdered in concentration camp of Sobibor when she was only 19 years old. So he lost all of his relatives. And then this is the school in Dortmund, Stadtgymnasium, where Simone and I went to last Wednesday, because in this week of November 9th, Reichspogromnacht, Reichskristallnacht, the old school of Curt Bloch, where he graduated, was doing an exhibition on Curt Bloch, which was very moving for both Simone and us. And then we find a chapter about Curt Bloch's immigration to the Netherlands, and then going into hiding and publishing his underground magazines, and then the post-war period and immigration to the United States. First, he marries Ruth Kahn, who is a survivor, and 3 years later they go on a ship and emigrate to New York. So this is in the history section. And then we have an extensive chapter about the underwater cabaret. So here is a calendar. You see that the first issue of the underwater cabaret was published on August 22 in the year 1943. And then 95 magazines followed until April 3rd, 1945, until liberation. And then you learn about the content, you learn about the design. He was using newspapers and magazines and cut out things and created his own collage style. You learn about the newspapers available at that time in the Netherlands, and also some information about readership and circulations. Then also to be found in the history section, information about the occupation of the Netherlands. So this was the bombing of Rotterdam. After 15 minutes, it looked like this. So the historic city was gone in only 15 minutes, and many people died. So then the Nazis took over the Netherlands. Many Jewish people fled from Germany to the Netherlands because they thought they would be safe, because the Netherlands was a neutral country during World War I. But no, the Nazis occupied the Netherlands, and so this is the story about the occupation of the Netherlands. Then, how did the persecution of Jews started, and what happened? You were showing the identity card of Curt Bloch with a big J, and so it started with humiliation of the Jewish people in the Netherlands, and then you also have shown this picture, and it's really very sad that from 130,000 Jews in 1940, only 25,000 Jews survived. All the others were killed. And from this picture, which you have shown, we only know that this guy, Peter Metzeler, has survived. So this is a very sad picture, by the way. So, and then we see families with their luggage in railway stations and then being deported from Westerbork to the concentration camps in East Europe. And there we find the transport lists where also Paula and Elena are listed. They were murdered on May 18 of 1943. So this is to be found in the history section. And then it's also interesting to learn about living in hiding. Actually, this was not Curt Bloch's hiding place. This is just a symbol photo, because we just wanted to show how it could have looked like. There's no photo available of Curt Bloch's hiding place, but of course we exactly know where it was. And so how was it to find a hiding place? Sometimes it was also a question of financials, because many people had to pay for it. This is the annex at Prinsengracht in Amsterdam, where Anne Frank and her family was in hiding. And here's another example for a hiding place. And then we have an extensive media library, because we also asked people to read the poems. This is what has started this year, and we have like 60 poems out of 492 poems already read. And here you see Simone's mother. Her name is Ruth Bloch. She is still alive and kicking, 99 years old. And we asked her to read certain poems. So here you could take a look at Der Novemberling or Een kleine verstoppeling vraagt, which is a Dutch poem. So if any of the participants of this Zoom meeting is interested, feel free to browse through the website. It's all for free. The website's name is curt-bloch.com, and you can just switch between the languages. If some of you speaks German, I strongly recommend to read the poems in the original language, because then you get rhyme and rhythm and everything, rhyme, rhythm, and sometimes the wit gets lost by translation. But of course, if someone speaks Dutch, I recommend the Dutch poems very much. So just to give you an idea about the website, it's very easy to work with, and I think it's a treasure. And yeah, imagine that someone was in hiding, being threatened by the Nazis, and comes up with this creative survival strategy.
Wow. Does anybody have any questions? I mean, there's so much there. My goodness. Yes, Anita? Or-
I was
Yeah.
just curious about the images on the covers. They're so striking, and clearly involved a lot of artwork or, they look to me, and of course, I'm seeing them very small still, but I'll spend some time on the website to look at them larger, but they maybe came from some images from newspapers, etc. But what must have been involved to get that level of artistry into those weekly publications in a small space and with minimal materials? It's just like inconceivable. I can barely imagine how that could have happened.
They are collages. They are not drawings.
Okay,
So,
not drawings.
so it's really like a selection of,
Okay,
I mean, they are collages. They're then pretty, not that many images from on each one. They're not, it's not a painstaking kind of thing. What was really painstaking is the poetry, which is like
yeah,
literally like, writing. It's my elevator pitch of it is my father is like Tupac Shakur meets Anne Frank with delusions of Stephen Colbert. Like it's because it's because he's doing like the weekly news
yeah,
in
right.
rap, but he's also fearing for his life.
Right. I mean, I'm very eager to spend time with those words, but I just I was just amazed by all the different images and how they were prepared in a tiny little place without much in the way of resources.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They didn't have a lot to eat, but there was a lot of propaganda, so there were many images to choose from. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are so many perspectives to approach this work. You can come from the aesthetic or art perspective, as you just mentioned, but you could also examine the work on the verbal level, like the rhymes, the rhythm. Then there is, of course, history. A lot of historical events are mentioned in these poems. And then there is also sound and music, because some of his poems are declared as songs. And even there's one poem which has notation, musical sheets. So this is really interesting, and we can't wait that people all over the world are working with this material now and send in musical interpretations of his poems. So I think this is really actually this could be fun to work with. And there's a lot of humor in it. So of course some poems are really depressing, especially when he sends wishes to his little sister, which he loves very much, and he doesn't know at that time that she is already being murdered. But many other poems are really fun to read, and he's really mocking Hitler and Goebbels. And then there's this poem, for example, when he goes out in his imagination as a reporter, asking the animals how they think about the current times. And so the cat answers, the horse responds, and the king lion. So it's really interesting, and it's all in rhymes. So it's really like Simone just mentioned, it's really a rap of its times.
Yes, Michael.
This has been an incredible story to hear. I wanted to ask, earlier you said it was circulated among 20 to 30 other people. Is there any information about who they were? Were they other Jews in hiding? Were they the Dutch? Is there anybody else that had come forward or said they had seen these as a survivor? I mean, who was reading these on those 20 to 30 people that it was circulating around? Is there any information about that?
There were, I mean, as we understand it, and neither one of us speaks Dutch, so, but there were other groups, people in hiding with Dutch people. And so it was kind of sent around, it was circulated to others who knew they could trust each other. And when they had finished and he got it back, that's when he would send out the next one. And so who they were Dutch, communists, I mean, that's the resistance were mostly communist. And then the people who they were hiding, who were either Jews or, political underground for political reasons. I mean, my father was more underground for political reasons than for both reasons, but he had to flee Germany in the first place because he had been known to be anti. My father was in Antifa, before we started people here started calling that a bad thing. I don't know what's wrong with being against fascism, but somehow it's turned into a bad thing. But anyway, Antifa was what it was called, and he was known as that. And he was being, he had to leave Germany because that would have gotten him executed early on. So,
and some of the names we know, for example, Ola Wolf, who was also in hiding in Enschede. So some people are known, some are not.
Right, and then there was, and Ola Wolf. She actually, there's a whole other side to this that we don't even cover. That is, she was a woman that my father had a big crush on, and so he did a separate series of magazines just for her, called Secret Service, not Underwater Cabaret, that had some love poems in them, and those were exhibited at the Jewish Museum Berlin. So it was like, he was a busy man. It was an unrequited love. So,
he had time.
Yeah, he had time and no cell phone. Yeah.
That's a great story. Yes, Scott. You're muted.
Hi. What was your dad's career after he immigrated to Philadelphia, to the States?
My parents were antique dealers in New York, because my father was, he was a lawyer and then was a judge. I mean, he was, in the German system, that was what he would have been had he stayed. Had Jews been allowed to do that. And when they came here, they didn't have the resources for him to go to graduate school. So that's what they did.
Thank you.
Sure.
Well, we're nearing the end of the time we have allotted. Is there one more question, maybe a final question?
Bravo.
We are blessed to have you here and to fill out all of this. This is truly amazing, and I'm really moved. And I thank you so much for providing your knowledge. Curt Bloch was truly an amazing, multi-talented man. And I hope that you're successful in getting more shows and more publications. In any way, we should all know about this. And I thank you.
Bravo.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Abraham, for bringing this to
Yeah,
us.
thank you, Abraham.
Sending best wishes from Germany.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We'll
Thank
stay
you
in
so much,
touch.
Simone.
Thanks to all of you.
Yeah,
I've been
great,
here.
It
great
was amazing.
presentation.